Chapter 11. Cool story, bro. It's the answer I would have given, but it actually comes from AJ standing in the doorway, having returned from whatever errand took her away in the dead of night. Unicorn blood? She chuckles. Yeah, sure, I'll just swing by my uncle's ranch and grab a vial. Darius studies AJ seriously, as is his way. It's hard to tell if he's annoyed by her sarcasm or wondering. Who is your uncle? What's his family line? Yep. Wondering if her uncle really has a freaking unicorn. AJ walks into the kitchen, laughing to herself, and pulls a beer from the fridge. Apparently Grandpa didn't finish all his Budweiser before he passed. Jesus, have I not cleaned out the fridge since I moved home? My uncle doesn't have a unicorn, numbnuts, she responds, leaning against the counter and popping the bottle cap off with a lighter. Darius bolts to his feet, fast enough to startle even his magical buddies. Watch yourself, nymph, he hisses, teeth bared. Your powers are few and the stakes are higher than you can fathom. Cross me any further and you'll see. Rune grabs Darius by the elbow, and it looks like those Fae calming powers have at least some effect on vampires. Darius takes a deep breath and then slowly moves back into his seat, like a predator biding his time. AJ looks between the two for a second, then laughs. She smells a little boozy. I'm starting to think her errand was a stupid one. So what's the plan? I ask, trying to get the conversation back on track. One of you goes to your world and comes back with some blood? We can't return until the message has been received, Zev says, shaking his head. For any of us to show up without the child and no prior notification would send the kingdom into a panic. Really? I ask. Even if you told people, or your kind, that you were coming right back to protect the baby. Now all three of them shake their heads, solemn looks on their faces. I'll never be able to empathize with the severity of their situations, since I'm the mom of the baby they want to steal, but a small part of my brain recognizes the gravity of what they're dealing with. Okay, 3 things need to happen, I say as I turn toward the fridge, lost in thought and also immediately ravenous. I've been working too hard, sleeping too little, and acting as a full-time milk generator for a hungry newborn. Need to eat my body weight in carbs. The minute I open the fridge door, AJ sprints past me through the living room and out the door, yelling, "Don't eat!" on her way out. The guys watch her go suspiciously, then turn back to me. She moves and thinks erratically, Rune observes. I nod. That's as good a way as any to describe AJ. I hear her feet scampering back up the outdoor steps, and she enters seconds later with a giant smile on her face and a massive pizza box in her hands. House of Pizza. I trail off, hoping I'll still be able to chew while crying tears of joy. AJ and I spent half our high school years inhaling pizzas from this place. She opens the box, displaying a steaming extra-large pie covered in sausage and mushrooms. It's the best gift I've ever received. I thought you might want something other than Rune's salad bar, AJ says. Also, while I was there I had a couple beers and practiced nymphing, so the pizza was free. That's not a thing, Darius says, perplexed. AJ just grins. It is now, bitches. Oh lord, Nymph AJ is going to be a lot to handle, but also a lot of fun. I walk over to her and take the box, mouthing I love you as I do. Then I turn back to the guys, not wanting the sexies to see what I'm about to do to this pizza. I compose myself and finish my thought from earlier. Alright, for things need to happen. First, I'm gonna eat every slice of this thing. Second, I want to know what's actually in this goddamn prophecy you keep talking about. Third, you figure out where you're going to get unicorn blood and then let me know if I can help. But like, that better not involve killing a unicorn, okay? I've seen all the Harry Potter movies and read the books. I know how that shit ends. And fourth, I conclude moving toward my bedroom. I'm going to sleep, waking only to feed my baby, and I don't want to see anyone until morning. I hear no protest as I walk off, excited beyond measure for the face stuffing I'm about to do. But then an unexpected blast of nostalgia, one unrelated to AJ, punches me in the gut and stops me in my tracks. The smell of the pizza takes me back a couple decades to a summer day when I was a child. I spin around, facing my housemates. Sorry, there's a fifth thing. I need to go see my grandma. Rain only wakes me twice during the night to feed, otherwise sleeping like a little angel, because that's what she is. When I get out of bed in the morning, I quickly eat one of the 4 remaining pizza slices and then sneak into the bathroom to brush my teeth before heading to the front room. I'm not expecting to literally run into a naked werewolf, I smack Zev with the bathroom door, and he gracefully dodges the brunt of the impact, though it would do little to harm him regardless. He grins and steps in my direction, not bothering to hide his nudity or the evidence that he's happy to see me. I pry my gaze away from his huge. "Can I be of service?" he asks, and dear heaven help me, I just want to throw myself at this man.
Sorry.
I didn't know anyone was in here. He takes another step closer until our bodies are almost touching. I don't mind sharing. I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. All I can think is 1, why aren't we both naked? 2, how can I brush my teeth before this goes any further? And 3, who cares what my third thought is? Let's go back to 1. Why aren't we both naked? I feel lost in the woods when I look into his eyes, and as his arm slides around my waist, pulling me against the hard length of his body, I go weightless. He brushes his lips against my neck. You feel it too. I don't know what it means, but yes, I certainly feel something. He flicks his tongue against the spot he bit in the bath, and heat pools in my abdomen as my body aches in need of him. Careful, woman. You're playing with fire. When he pulls away from me, I feel like a balloon that's been deflated. And as he walks out, closing the door behind him, I lean against the bathroom counter and take a deep breath. Damn him. Once I can stand without shaking, I groom and dress for the day, then head to the living room. The sexies are still gathered around the table, and I wonder if they just stayed up all night staring at each other like weirdos, with the exception of Zev, of course, who at least had a brief break to torture me in the bathroom. They explain that they did not, with Rune and Zev sleeping in shifts, while Darius of course remained awake since he's a creature of the night. While I slept, a few plans were hatched. I'm not allowed to travel without a guard, and I can't be alone with just one prince until the pledge takes effect. Therefore, Rune and Zev will accompany me on my journey to see my grandma. Journey is their word, not mine. We're driving like 15 minutes down to Ipswich. In the meantime, Darius will stay here to get his 2 hours of sleep and ask AJ questions about potential places to find a unicorn. AJ's still asleep, and it makes me really sad to know I won't be in the house to see her face when Darius starts inquiring about the local mythical creature scene. After feeding, changing, and bundling Rain, I get myself ready to step into the world for the first time since I became a mother. It's an odd sensation, thinking of who I might see and what they might say, and it's all made odder by the fact that I'll have to explain the gorgeous, mysterious company I'm keeping. As I buckle Rain down in the car seat in the back of my 2004 Subaru Forester, affectionately named the Babara by AJ, I'm surprised by how excited I am. I'm outside. I get to go for a drive. I'm like a happy retriever. I try to hide my giddiness as Rune gets into the passenger seat next to me. His presence is a strange mix of calming and electric, accelerating my heart rate while wrapping me in a warm sense of security. 2 days postpartum, and I'm developing a schoolgirl crush on at least 2 hunks from another realm. Hard to tell if I'm lucky or cursed. The roads from Rowley to Ipswich are shit, which makes the drive longer but gives Zev and Rune more time to break down the prophecy that's upended my life and the lives of many others. From the way they talk, 3 realms are in the throes of chaos and on the verge of collapse because of this situation. The issue for so many, Rune explains, is that you have to look back to the beginning of time, the origin story of each race, to understand the problems underlying our societies today. Most of the brightest fae, werewolves, and vampires are not capable of that scope of thought. Certainly not vampires, Zev growls from the back. Well, let's see how a human can handle it, I say. Start from the beginning. Rune nods, and it seems like both an affirmation to my request and like he's queuing up a really long story in his head. I ease off the gas a little. No need to hurry when I've got the history of an entire world coming my way. The story starts with the Fates, who originally spawned the What's a Fate? I ask, crashing Rune's story before it even has a chance to begin. They were the original witches sisters who had great power, Zev offers. From the back, he leans forward and grips my seat, his fingers brushing against my arm. Not that I'm paying attention to that. In addition to their own kind, they created all races of magical beings. The first witch created vampires from her blood, Rune says, continuing as if Zev hadn't interrupted. The second turned a rib into the first of the wolves, and the third gave life to the Fae with the air from her lungs. Okay, I say skeptically. So far it sounds like the parts of the Bible I find hardest to believe. I've read your Bible and I don't disagree, Zev says with a gruff chuckle. That sends shivers up my spine. But the Fae have documented history from the second generation of existence. And vampires being what they are, many direct descendants of the Fates. Creation still live today. Rune adds. Darius is only 3 generations removed. Well shit. Looks like the paranormal's brought receipts. Fine, you're all made from which parts? I concede as snarkily as possible. What was the prophecy written on? One of the Fates' arm fat. The different races dictated the Fates' words in their own way, Rune says. Dismissing my attitude. Werewolves maintain the story orally, speaking it to pups. Singing, Zev corrects. We pass on our history through song. I make a mental note to start a karaoke night at Morgan's and force Zev to sing this prophecy in wolf form. Very well, Rune says. Sung by the wolves. Fae, as Zev mentioned, wrote fastidious notes, and the vampires tasked a group of immortals to preserve the story. Aside from a slight discrepancy here or there, each of the 3 races maintains a similar version of the Fate's original decree. So wait. I'm now invested in the story and want to parse out some details. What about witches? We've got 3 races invented by witches. Did the Fates forget to, have babies or something? Rune shifts in his seat, brow furrowed as he thinks of the best way to answer. Me. Zev laughs again, and I swear he does this in the sexiest way possible. Like he's rehearsed sexy laughs in the mirror so much that it now seems totally natural. But there's nothing natural about his level of sexiness. Nothing. The Fates did indeed spawn more witches, Zev says. For many ages they were the most powerful race, then they stood on an equal plane for centuries as the other races grew and eventually began to outnumber the witches. Then he drifts off, his gaze shifting toward the increasingly uncomfortable Rune. Until what? I ask, my eyes spending way too much time on Zev in the rearview mirror and not enough time on the road. Rune takes his cue from Zev and picks up the story, though it clearly pains him to do so. A feud began between the Fae and the witches over the rights to some of nature's gifts. The Fae began killing witches for their land and the magical materials they cultivated, Zev says, clearly annoyed at Rune's milder retelling, which led to the vampires taking advantage of a weakened race, Rune says, and enjoying the powerful blood of witches fleeing the war. And unless I'm mistaken, many a wolf helped the vampires with their tracking during that era. Now it's Zev who's looking out the window, unhappy with the truth that's just been leveled at him. I feel like they're both too close to the story and need a third-party summation. So, you shitbirds killed all the witches? Not all, Rune quickly explains. Once the vampires began to attack, a great many witches came to Earth, taking human form as we have done, and beginning new lives amongst your kind. They came to this very continent around the same time as the Europeans, hoping to find a new world of their own. When the story transitions from a magical realm I can't quite fathom to the land where pilgrims and Puritans settled, where I grew up and studied the local history, a circuit breaker trips in my brain. Hang on. That witch shit from the 1600s that was real? Rune slowly shakes his head, giving Zev the opportunity to jump in. Yes and no, the werewolf says. Witches were here, living alongside and even marrying humans. However, it was almost exclusively human women burned in your horrific trials. Easy there, I fire back, not wanting to be lumped in with the old white men who burned women at the stake because they were afraid of getting boners. Those weren't my trials. But please continue. Vampires tracked the witches to this world, Zev says, now constantly thirsting for their blood. Once the rumor of witches spread, it was the vampires who took human form and pointed fingers at ordinary women, even controlling minds during the trials to create the needed spectacle. I've known witches were real for a few hours, and I'm already ready to kick Darius square in the balls for what his kind did. Okay, I say, trying to put things back on track as I notice our exit is approaching. That's super fascinating and I want to hear more, but how does this tie into present day? Why are the races fighting, and what in God's name does it have to do with my baby? If you'll remember back to the beginning of the story, Rune says with a professorial nod, happy to connect the dots for me. The Fates created us all. They are inextricably tied to each race, and we to them. As they died out, hardships engulfed each kingdom. and the elders who had been crying about the prophecy for generations were finally heard. Each version of the prophecy, Zev explained slowly, giving my human brain a little breathing room as it processes the wildest shit I've ever heard. Acknowledges that if the witches die, so will all the beings they created. I look from Zev to Rune, and they both return sullen stares waiting for me to speak. I take it a lot of the witches have died? They both nod. Then Zev speaks in a softer voice than I've heard him use previously. There are no more in our world and very few here. Few enough. He pauses, giving his words extra weight. That we've come to the final part of the prophecy. I can tell Zev is just going to stare at me until I guess again, so I turn to Rune in hopes he'll just spill the goddamn beans. The sweet and sexy Fae doesn't disappoint. When the last witch is born, he says, as though reciting the thesis for his doctorate, the kingdom that harnesses her life will survive while the others perish. His words filter slowly through my ears and into my brain with only one phrase having a lasting impact. The last witch? I nearly miss my turn as I try to process the information, slamming on the brakes and skidding along the icy road, then fishtailing into a parking lot. Having driven in the snow since I was a teen, the move doesn't scare me that much. For once, the nerves of the Fae and werewolf are more frazzled than mine. But that might be because I'm in a state of complete shock. I autopilot into a spot right in front of Nanny's assisted living home in Ipswich and exit the car, still fighting with the words floating inside my brain. The last witch? Zev and Rune get out and fall in line behind me as I walk toward the entrance. Thankfully Zev grabs Rain out of her car seat. As I'm in such a haze I walk away from the car without even getting my baby. I would have remembered within seconds, but it's still a moment I know I'll beat myself up for until I die. We pass people as I walk through the door, only half noticing the looks given to my companions. My weary brain is pretty used to the way they look and dress, but 10 seconds in public reminds me how much they stick out in these small New England towns. The last witch? At this point I'm not just thinking the phrase, I'm mouthing it as well. We've arrived at the front desk and I'm about to sign in when Zev hands me my child and the obvious connection finally clicks. Holy shit, she's the last witch. Zev and Rune don't respond, probably because they're contemplating using magic to disappear. I look around the room, feeling no fewer than 18 sets of eyes on me. The harshest glare comes from the young nurse working the reception desk. Hi, I say, trying to compose and cover for my outburst. They're catching me up on a TV show and just gave away a huge spoiler. I playfully punch Zev in the arm for effect, forgetting again that his body is made of muscle armor. I give a half-hearted smile, sign in at the front desk and lead the way toward Nanny Tilly's room. There are more questions I want to scream, but this clearly isn't the place for it. When we get to Nanny's door I stop, the trailing sexies halting behind me. Face them, giving as serious a look as I can muster, even while Rune's eyes melt me and Zev's eyes consume me. I need you two to wait out here, I say. There's a window in the door so you can keep an eye on me, but my grandma's been in a, let's say, disturbed mental state since my mom died when I was 11. She's been worse since she started living here a few years ago, and I never know what kind of mood she'll be in. I don't want any extra bodies in the room that might stress her out. Also be prepared for no fewer than a billion questions when I get back. Neither of them likes the idea of me going in alone, but they both give a subtle nod of agreement. I put my hand on the cold brass handle, overwhelmed by this revelation but still excited about introducing Rain to her only living relative. I have such fond memories of life with my grandparents Matilda and Edwin, or Tilly and Ed. They'd always take me to get pizza even when my mom told them I couldn't eat more junk food. We'd spend long days on the beach, take camping trips into the mountains, sail to the Cape and drive to Boston to go see movies my mom said I was too young to watch. Everything changed in an instant when my mom died. Nanny was reclusive for weeks and then I became very sick and she just went insane. Couldn't speak in full sentences, would wail and point at things that weren't there. I recovered from my mysterious illness, but she never did. Gramps could keep her calm most times, though she was in and out of institutions until I went away to school. Once I was out on my own I became focused on my life and didn't check in with my grandparents as much as I should have, and suddenly Nanny was moving into a home. I came back for a week to help Gramps make the transition, getting her room set up and personal items in order. She and I took a walk in the woods. before I helped her settle into her new apartment that day, and it was the most peaceful I'd seen her in years. I visited with her a handful of times since moving back, but I can't tell if she recognizes me. I don't know if she's aware her husband died. I struggle to come see her because it makes me sad. I regret not spending more time with her, and I miss the moments we had before everything changed. I take a breath to steady myself and then walk into her room. She's lying in her bed staring out the window. She's still beautiful in her old age, long silver hair hanging just below her shoulders, deep lines on a face that was once so youthful. When she's still, it's easy to see the old Tilly, and it warms my heart. None. She slowly turns away from the window until her eyes meet mine. We hold each other's gaze for a second, and she gives me a soft smile. But then her eyes drift down to Rain, locked into her harness blissfully, unaware of the world around her. Tilly stares at the baby, her smile fades. And then she screams. Chapter 12. Nanny screams wake the sleeping child in my arms, whose own wails join the cacophony of crazy. Within seconds, Zev and Rune burst into the room. Zev, already partially shifting into a wolf, both of their gazes trained on my grandmother like they're going to attack. Stop! I shout, startling everyone except Rain, whose lungs seem to have grown exponentially since we got here, if her volume is any indication. Do not hurt her, I tell the guys, and get back into full human before someone sees you. I hiss at Zev, whose arms are already paws. Looks like I stopped him in time before he ripped through yet another outfit. He's barely shifted back when a nurse hurries into the room. What happened? She asks, breathless from running down the hall. She immediately checks on Nanny, who stops screaming but is moaning and clearly agitated as she shifts around in the bed like she's fighting her blankets. I hand Rain to Rune, whose gifts of calm wash over the child until she's back asleep in his exceptionally chiseled arms. Prying my gaze from his guns, I move quickly to Nanny's side and try to calm her. You're okay, Nanny. As me, Bernie. Shoo. The nurse checks her blood pressure and temperature and TSKs at me like she's scolding a child. Tilly doesn't need this kind of stimulation. It isn't good for her health. I'm aware of that, I say, trying to hold back my irritation. We didn't do anything. She just started screaming the moment I walked in. What's wrong with her? Has she had more episodes? I normally get notified if it seems like she's taking a turn for the worse. She's been just fine until today, just now, the nurse says with more than a little accusation in her tone. I think it's best if you go. Her blood pressure is much higher than I'd like it to be. I just need a few minutes with her, I say. And my cousin, he always knows how to calm her down, don't you, Rune? Zev smirks. That's right, cousin. Rune frowns at the werewolf but hands him the baby as he joins my side. Of course. He smiles at Tilly. Hello, great aunt. He places a hand on hers and her thrashing slows as she responds to Rune's calming powers. The nurse narrows her eyes at us, then shrugs. Fine. 5 minutes. Then you must let her rest. Once the nurse is gone, I focus my attention back on Nanny. Rune stays by her side holding her hand. If I leave, she will become agitated again, he says. Sadly. I nod, blinking away unwanted tears. Zev joins us and kneels next to me while holding Rain so Tilly can see her. This is your great-granddaughter, I say, fighting the emotion making my words crack. And Rain, this is your great-grandmother. She raised me through my terrible tweens and teens. She made sure I always had a tutor for my piano. Even when they could barely afford to keep the bar open, she made me a dress for prom so I wouldn't feel left out when we couldn't afford to buy one. Can no longer fight the tears that stream down my face. She's the best. You're a lucky little girl, I tell my child. Then I turn to the woman who's been everything to me for so long. Oh, Nanny, I wish you were here. Really. Here. I don't know how to do this without you. You always had the answers and now I feel so lost. It's more than I wanted to say in front of the sexies, but the words pour out of me before I can censor them. Come back to me, okay? To us. Zev slides his free arm around my waist and helps me stand, my legs already cramping. Rune nods and pulls his hand away. He and Zev take Rain out while I say final goodbye. I feel a sickening sadness as I smooth her brow one more time before leaving. I'll come visit you as soon as I can, Nanny, I whisper. When I pull my hand away, she reaches for me grabbing my wrist with an iron grip that surprises me. Her voice is monotone and her eyes glazed over as she speaks. Beware the stars, beware the moon, beware the language that ends with doom. Her nails dig into me and she hisses. I am you. She is here. You are. She. I pry my wrist out of her grip, a bruise already forming. Nanny, what do you mean? Tears stream down my face and I watch helplessly as Nanny's face scrunches up and her body starts to seize. The nurse returns with a needle. Without preamble, she injects Nanny with it. And my grandmother instantly calms, her eyelids fluttering shut. I don't want to go, but the nurse stands by the bed watching me, her expression clearly annoyed. I leave with a heavy heart, pulling the door closed behind me. Rune and Zev are waiting for me in the hall, and when Zev sees the tears in my eyes, he pulls me into a hug. I want to resist, to push him away as I think about my Nanny instead of this witch business. Instead I melt into his arms, grateful for his strength, for his comfort, even for his presence. If I can set aside why he's here, the fact that I'm not alone is a relief. Zev rubs my back as I cry into his shoulder. He smells like the woods and feels so solid, so grounded that my heart slows and my mind calms just by being this close to him. You okay, love? He asks softly, his lips brushing against the top of my head, creating a whole other sensation in my body. I nod against his chest. Then, when I feel strong enough, I step back to look into his forest green eyes. I've never seen her like that before. She's had breakdowns in the past, but nothing like that. I heard what she said, Zev says, which seems impossible considering he was on the other side of a closed door, but then I remember he has dog abilities and is probably listening to everyone in Rowley all the time. Did her words mean anything to you? I think for a second, then shake my head. Not really. Something about the language of doom? But she's always spouted strange things ever since her mind started to go. I just don't understand why seeing rain freaked her out so much. We head back to the car, and I feel distant and drained as Rune locks the baby into the car seat and stays in the back with her while Zev sits up front with me. I guess it's time to find some unicorn blood? I say with all the enthusiasm of someone about to go to the dentist. That can wait, Zev says gruffly. You're shaking. I look down at my hands and realize he's right. And I can't stop. I feel panic rising in me, unlike anything I've ever felt before. Zev takes one of my hands in both of his, and the warmth from them infuses my skin, spreading over my body. Crazy shit has been happening to me ever since the three of you walked into my bar, I say, turning to glare at each of them. And then you spring on me that you think my daughter is a witch. Oh, and by the way, she's not just a witch, she's the last witch. What does that even mean? Zev turns my hand over and brushes the pad of his thumb over my palm in rhythmic strokes, like he's trying to calm a wild animal, which maybe isn't far from the truth. That night we followed the signs of the prophecy. At this point I don't know much more than you, I'm afraid. We followed the fallen star. And it led us to you both. The rock. I haven't thought about it since that night, but the rock I pulled out of the wall, it didn't look like a regular stone because it most definitely is not. So Rain's a witch? How? This isn't like AJ's situation. Rain's dad isn't magical. I'm sure of it. This wouldn't be passed down through her father's lineage, Rune says softly. The implication of his words takes a moment to settle into my frazzled mind. So you're saying she got it from me? I choke out a laugh.
I'm definitely
not a witch. Zev frowns. Stranger things have happened, but you almost certainly are. My eyes widen. So you're saying my mother was a witch? And your grandmother? Rune finishes my thought. I could feel her power. It was confused, untamed, but very strong. Overwhelming, perhaps. I've never felt more clarity regarding the prophecy. Tilly is a witch? I feel like I'm in an episode of The Twilight Zone. Undeniably, Rune says. I look to Zev, who's nodding, clearly no question in his mind either. The next 10 minutes pass in silence, as Zev and Rune respect my need to process. I can't just accept this witch business the way I did with AJ being a nymph, especially since with everything they've said about nymphs, that one makes perfect sense. They're saying I'm a witch. My daughter, who can't yet see an inch in front of her face, is a witch. Before my mother died, I was apparently being raised by a witch. And after she went, when I spent my days and nights with Nanny and Gramps, I was still under a witch's guidance. What is a witch? I don't know what this means on the most basic level, and yet, the more I reflect, the more I have to consider the possibility. Tilly was always a little off, but in that quiet grandmother kind of way. She fully departed reality when my mother died, but even then she went mad in her own interesting way. A lot of nights spent at the cliffside where my mom killed herself, and a lot of lucid conversations with Gramps about why they needed to go look for Lauren, my mom. I remember overhearing those talks from my room, knowing Nanny was losing it but still wishing she was right. As we get closer to Morgan's, I decide to break the silence with a question. If my mom was a witch with powers and shit, why'd she kill herself? Zev looks over his shoulder at Rune, the two sharing a thoughtful stare before replying. Is Zev trying to figure out what the answer is, or are the two conspiring about how much I'm allowed to know? Rune finally speaks up. As you know from my story, magical abilities don't keep one safe from anguish. It's a good answer. Doesn't help me at all, but I can't blame Rune for that. We park the car and I get Rain out of her car seat. She's going to wake up screaming for food any minute, but I'm hoping she'll put that off just a bit longer to give my mind time to settle. It's only a little after 1 p.m., a much earlier return time than I expected. Thanks to Nanny's episode and the nurse with no manners. I figure Darius is still sleeping or hanging out in one of his darkened rooms, and AJ is either on a unicorn scavenger hunt or taking a nap in preparation for another long night of bartending. As I walk into the living room, those expectations get dashed in a hurry. Ice, sitting on the kitchen counter, drinking a beer and looking very proud of herself. Darius sits in the corner, furthest from the blacked-out windows and safe from errant rays of sunlight. And in the middle of the room, tied to a chair and looking woefully confused, is Michael Lawrence, my high school boyfriend. Mike. Bernie. We speak at the same time, matching exasperated tones. What are you doing here? I ask before my brain can catch up to my mouth. He's tied to a chair, Bernie. He's not the one you should be asking. I whip my head toward AJ, who's stifling a laugh. AJ, with God and 3 creatures from other realms as my witness, I will beat you to death with a ham hock if you don't tell me what's so funny right now. My burst of anger only makes her laugh harder, and she coughs up some of her beer in the process. Bernie, Darius starts. There's no need to worry. We've brought this man. No, AJ cuts him off. I need to tell her. You don't understand comedy. Darius, your timing will suck and the joke won't land. I don't believe there's anything to joke about in this situation, Anna. There's a real sibling vibe developing between Darius and AJ, one that I'm sure she likes and he can't stand. I think for a second about what AJ would have been like in high school if she had an older brother who was a vampire. That's not a thought I want to revisit. Okay, Jesus, just tell me. Yeah, and tell me. Michael looks terrified, and it's clear he's been told nothing. Okay. AJ snaps back. God, it's not like anyone's late for anything. Oh, right, hold on, I have to set this up right. She takes another sip of beer, but neither Michael nor I say anything this time because we know another interruption will just set her off and she'll take longer. Silence from Darius shows he's learned the same lesson. Bernie, this is Michael. You may remember him from high school when you two dated and he took your V card. I did not expect this part of my past to come up, and my face immediately turns fire engine red. When I turn away so Michael doesn't see me blush, I point my face at Zev and Rune, who look entirely confused. Anyway, AJ wisely gets back to her story before they can derail this ludicrous conversation with more questions, which is the first good thing that's happened to me all day. Turns out that while you and Michael were getting your hump on, Michael was also busy making little girls' dreams come true. I couldn't possibly be more confused, and I'm about to say as much when AJ finally spits out what she's been dying to say this whole time. Because your high school beau was a freaking unicorn. Chapter 13. AJ, what the damn hell is wrong with you? I shout, waking Rain, who begins to howl at the top of her lungs. I sigh, pull her from her car seat and pop out a breast to stick into her greedy mouth. Michael's eyebrows raise and he clears his throat. Can someone let me out of these restraints and explain to me what's going on? He speaks in a very formal and polite tone for a kidnappee. AJ hops down from the counter and saunters over to him. You know what's going on, Mikey Mike. Why don't you tell Bernie here what you really are? He glances at me, then back at AJ, then his shoulders sag. How did you find out? He asks. I nearly choke on my own tongue. Wait, it's true? You're a Unicorn. He nods, not able to maintain eye contact with me. I switch Rain to my other breast and begin pacing the room while she feeds. What the hell is going on? Does Rowley have any humans here? Is Joe an ogre? And Frank, what is he? A leprechaun. No one answers as I vent. I think back to high school, to the giddy days of new lust that felt like love. Michael was unquestionably the best-looking guy in the school, with his golden hair and matching eyes, his perfectly tanned skin and sleek muscles. He was on the track team and won more medals than I can remember. We used to make out under the bleachers when he snuck away from practice. He seemed magical at the time, but a unicorn? That's beyond the scope of what I can handle right now, though maybe it helps to explain him being such a fast runner. Let him go, I command anyone in the room. Ajay sighs and goes to release his bonds, but not before glaring at him. One wrong move and my vamp boy will eat you, got it? Michael's eyes widen and he nods his head nervously. I throw a look at AJ, little annoyed that she's talking tough to the majestic creature she brought here against his will. I haven't seen Michael since graduation. Last I heard he moved out of town and didn't keep in touch with anyone here. It's the goal for most people growing up in Rowley, and he's one of the few who accomplished it. I bet he's really loving this homecoming party. So now we're kidnapping people? I ask. Rain finishes feeding and I hand her to the closest person, Darius. The vampire looks at Rain in confusion, then walks over to the changing table, while I try to figure out what to do next. It wasn't kidnapping, AJ says, barely containing her laughter. More like horse-napping. Now she's literally doubled over in laughter, and as much as I want to be mad, I start to laugh too because this is just too absurd. I'm so sorry, Michael, I say as my hysterical laughter escalates. Now I can't control the fits, and AJ and I are both doubled over as the guys all watch us warily. Well, everyone but Darius, who seems to be having some trouble at the changing station. Is this normal? I think the young human is ill. I dash over there, worry replacing all other emotions, then my laughter returns when I realize what he's going on about. Nope, that's just normal newborn poop. Fun, right? He wrinkles his nose. It's smelly and oddly colored and formed. AJ hoots and slaps her leg. I can't with these guys. It's too much. Listen, Michael says, sidestepping us. I'm just gonna get going if that's all right. Darius stands and in a blink has handed the baby off to Rune and is blocking Michael's path to the door. You may not leave. Michael looks around nervously as Zev growls under his throat, and Rune, who's skillfully getting Rain diapered up and ready for a snooze, watches casually, in the way a cat is casual until it strikes. What do you want with me? Michael asks, giving up and sinking into my new luxurious couch. No one knows what I am. I live a quiet life. I don't want to cause trouble. We need your blood, Darius says with his whole I'm gonna eat you and you'll like it vibe. How much of it? Michael asks in an exasperated tone that makes it clear someone or something has asked for his blood before. But Darius, who clearly doesn't like being questioned, hisses, flashing extra pointy teeth. Who are you to question us? Do you know who we are? Oh Lord. Chill your tits, vamp boy. I step forward and grab Darius by the arm. You need some serious schooling in how to win friends and influence people. His ink dark gaze locks with mine. I am fully capable of influencing people, he says. I mean, without voodoo powers, I say. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. His brows crease in confusion. Never mind. Look, just let me handle this. You and AJ have done quite enough. I focus my attention on Michael, and as I look closely at him for the first time, I realize how ageless he is. Like a model stepping off the cover of a magazine, sculpted from clay and photoshopped to perfection. He's obviously matured since his teenage years, but he hasn't been ravaged by time in the way one would expect. Now I can see it, the supernatural beauty at work in him. We just need a vial or so, I say. I'm sorry they brought you in like this. I had no idea they were going to do that. And to state the obvious, I had no idea you were a unicorn. He stares at me for some time, the room quiet. It's good to see you again, Bernie, he says, surprising me. It's been too long. It has, I say, cocking my head. I meant to come by when I heard. He pauses. I'm sorry for your loss. But I didn't know if you'd want to see me after you dumped her like the piece of shit you are. AJ says, getting in his face. You broke her heart, you bastard. She was a wreck for weeks over your pathetic ass. For crying out loud, AJ, shut the hell up. That was like 10 years ago. She glances at me, nonplussed, but steps back a fraction. She still looks ready to cut a bitch though. Michael shrugs sheepishly. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I was worried. We were getting so close, and if you found out what I was scared. It was a long time ago, I say, and I know I'll be sitting with this later, worrying over every memory of Michael, reframing the end of my first serious relationship in light of all I've learned. But I'm a big girl now and have too much on my plate to stress about my high school broken heart. I would be grateful if you could spare some blood though. I know it sounds weird and all, but it's fine, he says as he pulls up his sleeve and holds out his arm. Take what you need. We can't take it from your human form, Rune says, inserting himself into the awkward conversation. Right, Michael says. You'll need to stand back. I don't want to hurt anyone. I move towards the kitchen to give him room, the realization washing over me that I'm about to watch the first guy I ever slept with turn into a horse. A unicorn, not a horse. I glance at Darius, who smirks. Out of my head, vampire. And excuse me, a unicorn. But I soon see that the distinction is an important one. Before my very eyes, Michael begins to glow an ethereal white. He doesn't contort and bend out of shape like Zev. Instead, I'm blinded by the light he emanates, and in a flash, he's transitioned from man to a gleaming white unicorn standing in my freaking living room. Michael. I step forward tentatively and hold out my hand to him. He leans his head down and I touch the softness of his mane and let my hand slide over his golden horn. A tingling pulses up my arm like magic, infusing me, and a euphoric kind of happiness overwhelms me. I smile, soaking up the feeling like it's water and I'm dying of thirst. Darius clears his throat, rudely interrupting the exchange. I will extract his blood now. Rune shakes his head. I don't think so. You'll contaminate it with centuries old bacteria. Allow me. Rune produces from some pocket or another a small silver blade and a crystal vial covered in etchings. I cringe as he slices into Michael's back leg, and golden blood drips into the vial. Once it's full, Rune waves his hand over the wound and mutters a few words in, I don't know, Elven or some shit, and when he removes his hand, Michael's unicorn flesh is once again unblemished. This should be enough, Rune says, studying the glowing golden contents. Michael nods and, in another blast of light, turns from unicorn to man once more. Unlike Zev, he still has his clothes on, and I try to convince myself I'm not the least bit disappointed by that. But I am curious. You keep your clothes when you shift? I ask totally nonchalantly. AJ blows my cover by snorting. Michael grins like he knows what I'm thinking. Sorry to disappoint. But yes, unlike shifters, my powers are pure magic. My body isn't changing form, my essence is returning to its true nature. Right. Sure. Makes perfect sense. Michael looks around and frowns. If there's nothing else, I assume I'm free to go. The sexies don't object, and I sigh, assuming that means it's fine. Let me buy you a drink first. It's the least I can do.
I glans at Rune.
Keep an eye on Rain. He nods, and the other two narrow their eyes like they're jealous, though that can't possibly be true. Michael and I walk downstairs to the bar, and I pour us both a shot of whiskey. Cheers, I say. He downs his drink and I refill, then move to the other side to sit with him. I see your apartment's gotten an upgrade, he says. Yeah, those guys, they're kind of a big deal and decided they wanted to live in style while here. Michael frowns. They're dangerous, Bernie. I don't really know what's going. But I've got a bad sense. Be careful with them. I know, I say. It's complicated. He chuckles. It always is with you. What does that mean? I ask. Just that life was never easy for you. He pauses. I hated ending things the way we did, but after your grandmother talked to me, Nanny talked to you? I ask, shocked. About what? Why? She didn't tell you? Tell me what? He sighs and sets his tumbler down. After prom, she came to my house. Said she knew what I was and that I needed to leave you alone. That being with you would ruin your life. She was convincing. I didn't want to hurt you, but really didn't feel like I had a choice. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I lean back against my bar stool, a wave of conflicting emotion flooding me. She didn't say anything to me for obvious reasons, I suppose. All of this magic shit was kept secret from me up until Rain was born. Congratulations, by the way, on your baby. She's beautiful just like her mother. His compliment makes me flush. What about you? I heard you left town. Just north of Boston, right? What do you do? Do you have kids? A wife? Yeah, we're in Saugus. He pauses. And I write fantasy novels for a living. I can't help but smile at that. They say write what you know. I guess that works out for you. He laughs. Yeah, something like that. And I have a daughter, Ellie. He reaches for his phone and pulls up a picture of a blonde girl with big blue eyes who looks about kindergarten age. She's lovely, I say. I'm glad you found happiness. Is her mother still in the picture? Actually, my husband and I are her parents. We used a surrogate husband. I'm not sure if I'm more shocked my old flame is a unicorn or gay. Both are unexpected. Yeah, I didn't know or didn't want to acknowledge it fully when we were together. It wasn't until college that I finally came out. That's when I met Robert. We've been together ever since. He looks at me cautiously, waiting for my response. I smile and take his hand. I'm so happy for you, Michael. How did your parents take it? I ask with a sheepish look, already knowing the answer. Michael came from the type of family that wouldn't be too keen on a gay son. He returns my look and shakes his head, but then relief fills his eyes as he swipes the picture on his phone to one of him and his husband. This is Robert. You two make a gorgeous couple, I say honestly. Does he know about that I'm a unicorn? He asks with a chuckle. Yes, it was kinda hard to hide. We used his DNA for our daughter to avoid any complications with her down the road. And he'd never betray my secret. Just like I won't betray yours. I raise an eyebrow. Yeah, about all this. I can't apologize enough. I've been thrown into the deep end of this supernatural shit. And it's been a hard ride. You shouldn't have been pulled into this. It's okay. I'm glad I could help. He takes one last swig from his glass. But next time just ask. I laugh as we both stand. I will. We hug and he pulls away to look at me. It was good seeing you again, Bernie. Even under the circumstances. You too, Michael. Don't be a stranger. And bring your family by sometime. I let him out the front door and lock it behind him, then walk back up to my apartment, my mind lost in the past to what was and what could have been. What did my grandmother know about this new world I now find myself thrust into? And why didn't she tell me the truth back then? Rune is in the kitchen cooking something in a pot when I return. Darius and Zev are playing chess, and AJ is sitting at the piano picking at keys. She looks up when I walk in. Wild, isn't it? She says with a cheeky grin. That's one word for it, I say grimly. How on earth did you know he was a unicorn? Well, Darius pieced it all together, she explains. He asked about the families that have been in Rowley the longest, and I said the Lawrences since. I've never heard of a Lawrence leaving town until Michael, and even he didn't get too far. Then he asked some weird questions about who was whose son, and suddenly I'm off to kidnap Michael while Darius waits in his bat cave. She gives me a ho-hum shrug and glances at the clock on the wall. Time to open the bar. Ready, boys. I cannot leave the potion until it is complete, Rune says. How long will that be? I asks. You cannot rush magic. Are you cooking Michael's blood in my kitchen? I ask, marching over to look into the pot. It has a golden hue and sparkles, just like something that would come out of a unicorn. Once it is done, we can complete our pledge and you will feel safe, Rune says softly, and I realize in that moment he's not just doing this to keep the three of them honest, but so that I will trust them. Softens me just a little. Thank you, I say, for trying to make me feel better about all this. Rune stops stirring for a moment to turn to me, his eyes looking a deeper blue than before, like the ocean pulling me into its depths. He takes my hands in his, stepping forward so our bodies are mere inches apart. I cannot say that. I know how hard this has been for you, but I can feel your pain, your worry, your fear. I know it's hard to trust us, but I hope you can at least believe that I want to make this easier for you while we work out what must be done. He drops one of my hands and brushes his knuckles lightly against my cheek. I did not expect to feel the way I do about you and the child. It has complicated things, but I would not change that for anything. I suck a breath in, my body humming with pent-up desires I can't act on. His eyes drop to my lips, and I want more than anything for him to come closer. But then AJ tugs at my sweater, breaking the spell between us. Let's go. Before our regulars show up. Right, I say, reluctantly pulling my hand and my gaze from his. I turn away as Rune resumes stirring his pot. AJ and I will go open up while you finish brewing up your potion. I say, trying to clear my head. Bring Rain down when you're done. I don't want her left alone while those nutcases are out there. The three of them nod and AJ and I head to the bar. Even before they finish their pledge, I'm already comfortable with them being around Rain. A lot has changed in a couple days. Everything, really. We wipe down counters and prep the bar for whoever might wander in tonight. I peppers me with questions about Michael, from what we talked about to whether he was hung like a horse in high school. You're terrible, you know that? I say, spraying her with the water hose at the sink. She shrieks, but before it hits her, she holds up her hands and the water turns to steam and dissipates into the air. I shake my head. I need some powers of my own. I wipe up the mess I made and walk to the door to unlock it. Speaking of, I found out some news about me and Rain today. Apparently we come from a long line of witches. She stares at me for a second, mouth agape, then rushes over and pulls me into a hug. I always knew you were special. More special than me for sure. I lean back to lock eyes with her. AJ, that's not true. I don't even have powers, not that I know of. You're special. You've always been more special than you know. PFT, she says, walking back to the bar. You're just saying that because you're a very friendly, accommodating witch. No, it's because you're my best friend and it's true, I counter, grabbing a rag left on one of the tables. You just turned water into steam with your mind and you can make dudes do whatever you want. You're like the most special. And maybe Rain has some hidden powers, but I'm just as ordinary as I was yesterday. She flicks me with the rag in her hand. Stop it. I see how those three sexy men upstairs look at you. Rune is ready to lay down his damn life for you. Zev looks like he's about to hump your leg. And Darius wants to eke you in the best possible way. She wags her eyebrows and I can't help but laugh. They didn't hunt a unicorn and make a vow for nothing. They want in your pants. Bad. So don't give me any bullshit about being ordinary. There's never been anything ordinary about you. Our conversation is cut short when the bell at the door rings. I expect to see Joe and Frank, but am surprised when it's Chief Roland. I stand and smile. Hey, can I get you a drink? I ask. Scotch on the rocks. Right. He smiles grimly. Good memory, but no, I'm not here to drink. Unfortunately, I'm on official business. About what? I ask, my heart suddenly pounding nervously in my chest. Did something happen to Tilly? He shakes his head. No, nothing like that. It's about John Marsden. He looks over at AJ. A few neighbors said he was driving this way the morning he disappeared. AJ freezes and I hold my breath, waiting to see how she responds. And you can drive this way without coming to this bar, she says, and I can almost feel the blast of her powers being thrown at the chief. His eyes widen and his mouth drops open as he struggles to find his words. We found some blood and the lab results finally came back. What do you mean? I ask, repeating AJ's words like an idiot. It was John's blood, and we found it in front of Morgan's. I'm going to need to talk to both of you and definitely to those strange men that have been hanging around. This has officially become a murder investigation. Chapter 14. How can I help you, officer? AJ and I both turn to see Darius walking into the bar from the back entrance. He's inexplicably wearing a designer suit and tie, rather than his usual cosplay dress up, and his dark eyes are locked onto the chief, who startles at the unexpected arrival. Yes, I have a few questions for all of you about the night of John Marsden's disappearance, but I'll need to speak with the other men as well. Darius crosses the room quickly, normal human quickly, not vampire quickly, and stands in front of the chief, towering over the stout man by at least 2 feet. There were only 2 of us, and my colleague is in the middle of an important meeting. I can answer any questions you may have. What kind of brain damage is the good chief going to suffer after being blasted by both AJ's nymphness and the vampire's mind melts, I wonder. Poor guy. I feel bad for him, but not bad enough to intervene 'cause I sure as shit do not want to get caught up in John's well-deserved murder. Right, well this is, as I said, a murder investigation, Chief Roland mutters, looking around like he needs that drink after all. I reach for his arm to guide him to a table. Why don't you have a seat and I'll get you something to wet your whistle while you talk to Darius and AJ? He nods vaguely and sits as I direct him. I give AJ and Darius pointed looks that I hope communicate something along the lines of do not mess him up too badly, but also get us out of this stat, and start pouring a scotch on the rocks, which I serve with a napkin and a smile as Nanny always taught me. I take the fourth seat at the table and wait for the chief to begin. Relying on familiar habits, he pulls a small notebook out of his breast pocket and puts his reading glasses on, then takes a swig of the drink before clearing his throat. Where were you the day of Mr. Marsden's disappearance? We were all here, I say. I had just had my baby, which Darius and Rune helped deliver by a miracle from heaven. AJ came over as planned to help take care of me, the baby, and the bar while I recovered, and we were dealing with the power outage and the storm. The chief nods, pushing his glasses up onto his nose before it slides off. Right. Can anyone else corroborate this? Other than all four of us? AJ asks with way too much snark.
Ikke karuner.
The table, and she flips me off when the chief isn't looking. Darius rolls his eyes like an exacerbated teacher and leans in. We know nothing of this man's disappearance. We were here throughout the power outage with no visitors. You will stop looking into this and determine John left town of his own volition. He was abusive, angry, and erratic. He walked around town looking for his wife, cut himself on a broken bottle of beer, grew frustrated, and left. I sit silently, waiting to see if his Jedi mind tricks work. The chief takes notes, then nods. Right. Yes, just had to dot all my I's and cross all my T's. You know how it is. Sure, AJ says, sitting forward in her chair, her face a mask. She doesn't have the same benevolent relationship with the chief that I do. To her he's the dickhead who never stood up for her when she called in John's abuse. The jackass who always berated her for her youthful indiscretions. It's taken me too long, but I'm finally seeing the truth. AJ and I did not have the same childhood, despite growing up the exact same way. My heart hurting, I reach for her hand and squeeze it, as the chief and Darius stand. How do you know Bernie again? The chief asks as they walk to the door. Darius glances back at me. Oh, I'm an old friend of her grandmother Tilly's. We go way back. His cheeky answer grates my nerves, but I hold in my ire until the chief is in his car and driving away. Then I walk up to Darius and punch him in the arm. The act of defiance predictably hurts my fist more than it hurts his steel arm, but I don't care. Don't you dare bring my grandmother into this again. You hear me? He stares at me long and hard, making me think the punch was a bad idea. First of all, he says, it was a good cover. Second, it was a warning shot. I raise an eyebrow, now more confused than angry. A warning? What to warn? The police chief not to do his job. You think we would have left any trace of the man we murdered? Darius says, his voice utterly patronizing. He's here on behalf of the same people who sent Carl. The nymph's dead husband is just his excuse to get us all talking. AJ and I share a look, both a little miffed by the vampire's assessment. Does this mean the whole police department's in on this? That seems excessive. In any event, I can't think about that right now. I've got to save my baby from literally everyone and try to run a bar while I'm at it. Let's just get this pledge over and done with, I say, preparing to follow him upstairs, but he stops me. You cannot be present. It must be done with only those taking the pledge in attendance for it to work. Sounds like a lot of bullshit to me, but honestly I don't even care anymore. Fine. Whatever. Go. I wave dismissively, sending Darius off to join the others for their little pledge, then turn to AJ. She's chewing her nails and staring at the wall. With as much as I've been through, it's easy to forget the tumultuous times that befell my friend these last couple days. Getting shot, losing her dickhead husband, finding out she's not human, becoming a full-time bartender. Hey, I whisper as I put a hand on her back. How are you? She turns to me quickly, the distant look gone from her face and replaced by a sweet smile. I think I'm fine. She sounds earnest, but it's still a little hard to believe. How could either of us be fine right now? She sees my doubt and works to convince me. I'm almost ashamed about it, but I've only felt relief since John, you know? And I might go home and look at a picture or find an old birthday card and get hit with some grief, but right now I'm only worried about you. Sounds a little messed up, but the last 2 days are the best I've had in a long time. That does sound messed up, I agree. I wish we could have turned this page a long time ago. She smiles again and puts a reassuring hand on my shoulder, turning the tables. On who's doing the comforting? No use thinking about what could have been. I'm a godmother to an angel and a freaking nymph now. Let's open this damn bar. A few hours later, Morgan's is in full swing. And by full swing I mean 9. People are quietly drinking beers. We get a little rowdy on St. Patrick's Day. But otherwise we're just a place for locals to escape into a pint and bide their time before they have to go back to lives they've mostly grown tired of. AJ's pouring drinks and I'm letting Jo tickle Rain's toes while she's wrapped in her little holster. As much as I'd love to let him hold her, I'm still too afraid. Jo's as trustworthy as they come, but no one in my life is what they seem anymore. I remind myself of that every time I look at Carl's normal spot in the back. Finally, the 3 sexies arrive. Each looks a little off. Darius lacks his normal aggressive intensity, Rune has slight bags under his eyes, and Zev in wolf form is panting a bit. I guess the hangover from a pledge potion is legit. The Fae and the vampire sit at the bar next to a younger guy named Max who's been coming to Morgan since his 21st birthday. He's a couple years older than me and pops in a few times a week, then goes home and lies to his wife about how much he drank. Max looks at Darius questioningly. You're not from around here, are you? No, Darius mutters back. Where you from? Max says, unaware of how poorly this small talk will go. Elsewhere. Max looks at me, eyebrows raised. Got a real chatterbox over here, Bern. I know Max. He's an old family friend. I say, my inflection dripping with distaste. Can't get rid of him despite how much we want to. I hear that, Max says with a smile. My wife's 2 sisters are staying with us. It's like the 3 of them can't talk without screaming. Don't matter if they're happy or mad, just constantly yelling. Jennifer's sisters are in town, huh? The beginnings of a plan start to percolate. I look from Darius to Rune, then down to Zev. All 3 are here for the long haul, whatever that haul may be. They also just chased down a unicorn and chug some serious moonshine in order to earn my trust. I'm not shutting down the bar because I need money and a home for my daughter, so I think I ought to make the best of this hand I've been dealt. Max, call Jen and tell her to bring her sisters here. What? Max says, terror in his eyes. Not on your goddamn life, Dash. Max, call your wife and tell her to come to Morgan's, I say, and I'll tell her you've had 2 beers instead of 6, and your kids can play out back with my husky. There's a moment of silence, then Max reaches for his phone. I knew this would be an easy win. I look down at Zev, his head cocked to the side, undoubtedly thinking angry thoughts. I scratch him behind the ears and coo at him like a dog. Darius almost laughs at that, his permanent frown twitching into a near smile. While Max begrudgingly texts, I move over to the stool where Rune is sitting. He's sipping what looks like a rum and coke, but I'm pretty sure it's just water with some rum-colored magic. How are you doing? I ask softly, feeling an almost uncontrollable urge to care for the man who's done so much for me recently. Rather ill, he answers. He doesn't look up from his drink, but he does place his hand gently on my waist. It's intimate and exhilarating. In response, I put my hand on his leg, my fingers falling over the inside of his thigh. Well, if you're feeling up to it, I say, fighting the urge to let my hand creep higher. I have a favor to ask. Anything. His response comes immediately, his eyes penetrating mine, and suddenly I want to ask an entirely different favor that would require a trip to the bedroom. They'll be here in 10, Bern. Max's voice reminds me of what I really wanted to ask, and possibly keeps me from passing Rain to the nearest person with hands and leading Rune upstairs. Thanks, Max, I say quickly before turning back to my elven crush. There are some ladies on their way. Think you can make a cool-looking drink that's the most delicious thing they've ever tasted, and it gets them good and drunk, but with no hangover in the morning. My request is utter BS and I'm about to laugh, but Rune answers with a curt nod. Of course. Should it be fizzy? Perhaps an alluring shade of pink? I'll provide a few options. With that, He's up and behind the bar, looking through my liquor selection and pulling small vials from the inside of his coat. AJ, now a little territorial. As my head bartender, gives Rune an angry look. You're on break, I say. Come hold the baby while I play piano. She smiles widely, jumping at the chance to hold Rain. Feels like weeks since I had my baby, but it's only been days, and the opportunities for AJ to snuggle her goddaughter have been few and far between. I may not trust many people right now, but I trust AJ with my life. Always. Will. As she gently embraces my sleeping angel, I glide toward the piano, wondering what I'll play. I'm instantly overcome with emotion, thinking back to my youth, when I'd play for bar patrons all the time. Gramps used to tell me the bar would go out of business if people didn't come to hear me. I sit on the bench and uncover the keys. So many memories are tied to this instrument in this bar. My mom bought the piano when I was 5, then a couple years later Tilly moved it into this bar, right where it still sits today. This is where I grew up, and now I feel like I'm trying to grow up all over again. Play, Bernie. Joe's voice is soft and sweet, tied in with all those memories. It's the perfect motivation to get my fingers moving. I decide on Chopin's Nocturne Op. 9, number 2 in E-flat major, which was always Tilly's favorite. Even after her mind went, this song would make her smile and give her a moment of respite from whatever was ailing her. It's not the most complicated piece, which made it one I mastered early, and as my fingers glide over the keys, pulling from strings and ivory, a hypnotic melody that carries its own kind of magic, that same relief washes over me. The music takes me out of myself and away from all the fear and uncertainty that have plagued me since Rain arrived. I can't wait to teach my baby to play piano. I don't realize how quiet the bar has grown until I finish, the pads of my fingers resting on the last notes. After a breath of silence, there's a smattering of applause that seems much louder than our few patrons should justify. I turn towards the bar and notice AJ has tears in her eyes, the kind of crying you do when you're incredibly proud of your friend. Rune has stopped mixing drinks, his enchanting face looking extra enchanted by my music. Darius looks calm and content, which is a big mood change for him. Even Zev seems affected and is now curled up by my barstool watching me. Girls' night. Woo-woo. No voice shatters a mood quite like Jennifer's. She and her sisters waltz through the door looking like 3 women who refuse to let spring break end. They're all attractive enough, even if each of them is wearing a dress that's one size too small. Bernie, I'd kiss your baby, but Miles has been wiping snot all over the house for 3 days, and I don't want you to have to deal with that shit. Holy Christ, who the hell are you? God, I love Jennifer. She's finally spotted Rune behind the bar, where he's got his sleeves rolled up as he firmly muddles some mint leaves. Good evening, he says before throwing a quick wink at me. Rune is totally in on my plan. We've got a special drink tonight if you ladies would like to try it. Jennifer and her sisters, who I think are named Rebecca and Amy, belly up to the bar, none of them even taking the time to acknowledge Max. He almost has to raise his hand to get his wife's attention. Babe, where are the kids? Good question, Max. At your parents' place playing video games with headphones on, Jennifer answers, eyes still on Rune. I told your mom to call you if they get too annoying. Max studies his wife and her sisters for a moment, then polishes off his beer and waves to me. It's a clear signal that he wants another, and I'm to remember not to tell Jennifer how many he's already had. I half whisper, loud enough to get her attention. Time to get back behind the bar and do some beer pouring and nymphing. I'm going to make Jennifer's night and really piss off a vampire. AJ nods her understanding and hands me Rain, who somehow slept through Jennifer's booming entrance. I walk over to the girls, all 3 of them so entranced by Rune that they don't even notice my approach. Thanks for coming in, ladies, I say with a semi-forced smile. Older men have always been the lifeblood of this bar, and I'm not entirely sure how to feel about 3 women here for ladies' night. Still, I've got bills to pay and sexy men to exploit. This is Rune, he's visiting from Europe and he'll be making some fancy foreign drinks. And this, I say, putting a hand on Darius' shoulder and feeling him tense as I do so, is Darius. The vampire stares at me, looking unamused as he waits to see what kind of description he gets. I can read in his eyes that he fears what I'll say next. He's an exotic dancer. Time practically stands still. The girls turn their heads in slow motion, pulling away from Rune and focusing on a new object of desire. Darius stares into my eyes and I feel the familiar, uncomfortable sensation of a voice entering my mind. You'll pay for this, Bernie. It's not an empty threat, but he doesn't scare me like he used to. I send it. Thought back his way. Maybe I just want to see you naked, Darius. And this is the best way I can think of to make my dreams come true. A little of the anger leaves his face, replaced by a slight trace of intrigue. I turn away, proud of myself for the sly reply, and also wondering how much truth there is to it. I join AJ behind the bar, surveying the scene I've created. A few girls swarmed around Darius, all of them sipping magical cocktails whipped up by Rune Joe scratching a man-turned-wolf behind the ears. Also, we've got 5 guys lined up at the bar staring at AJ, ready to order a 10th beer if it means she'll give even the slightest smile. Not a bad night at Morgan's, I'd say. I'm sneaking upstairs to feed and change Rain, I tell AJ. You keep everyone happy and drinking. Try this before you go. AJ hands me a cocktail that fizzes with magic. It's called a sexy Renedesvis, she says, unable to hold in her giggling. Get it? Rune-desvis like rendezvous, but I get it, I say with a laugh, 100% sure Rune did not name or approve of the name for his concoction. That's all, AJ. I sip on the drink and the flavors burst on my tongue, then the magic and alcohol mix in my body to create a nice mellow buzz. Damn, no wonder this is such a hit. I hand the drink back to AJ and duck over to the back exit, hoping to make a discreet getaway since I know the sexies get nervous if I'm out of sight. Once I get up the stairs and into my bedroom, I quickly change Rain and then start to feed her. When she's got a good latch and a steady gulp going, I head into the living room, and run smack into Darius. Jesus! I yell, causing Rain's eyes to flare open before going back to a contented half-mast. What the hell are you doing up here? He stands very close to me, closer than he's ever been aside from the times he was showing his teeth and hissing some kind of threat. We don't want you and the child alone, Bernie. Under no circumstances, no matter how quickly you think you'll be back. He's serious but sweet, a tone I've never heard in his voice. Then he does something even more unexpected. I was very upset I had to follow you. I was about to start dancing. Oh my God. Darius made a joke. I'm too surprised to laugh. His lips twitch into something close to a smile, and that's about as much of a reaction to humor as I can expect from him. Right, sorry, I say. I thought maybe the pledge would have mellowed that protectiveness. Darius shakes his head. We aren't worried about each other. We worry about whoever else might be out there. Again he smiles, this time it even reaches the edges of his lips, and I'm getting exposed to a whole new Darius. He steps even closer, our faces now inches apart. With all the antagonizing, I'd forgotten how perfect his features are, how easy it is to get lost in his dramatic gaze. As he starts to speak into my mind, it nearly causes my knees to buckle. I must say, Bernie, the thought of you dreaming about me in the nude was stirring. Oh shit. I awoke a lusting vampire. Minutes ago I was ready to take a Fae right there on the bar, not long ago I was sharing bathroom space with a naked werewolf, and now my body's begging to be wrapped in a vampire's arms. This kind of sexual energy can't be normal for a new mother. The werewolf hair stitching must be having an effect. That feels like a safe thing to blame all this on. Before I can think of how to respond to this advance, Darius stiffens. My gaze had been locked on his lips, but now I glance up and realize his eyes have gone completely white. His body trembles and he stares blindly into the empty space above my head. Darius? Darius, what's wrong? I don't want to raise my voice, but I'm seconds away from running down the stairs and screaming for help. Just as my nerves are about to break, he comes to, his body relaxing and his eyes returning to their normal piecing darkness. He stays still, thoughts clearly whirring around in his mind. What? What happened? I ask, afraid of the answer. I've communed with my father, the king. He received word of our predicament and passed on some news. All news is bad news at this stage of my life, so I don't have any question that I'm about to hear something terrifying. Apparently, Darius continues, the Order of the Star has returned. And once again the bad news makes zero sense to me. Okay, and I care because that's the group after your child, he says. It's a collection of witches with bad intentions, but the members disbanded over a decade ago. Appears they've reconvened. Of course, more magical enemies to deal with. If they're witches, do I know any of them? Darius thinks for a moment. I don't know. He looks at the floor, then back into my eyes to deliver the real bombshell. But it was amongst the order that I first met your grandmother.